hey, listen, we'd like to see a shutdown analysis for the business. We'd like to understand, what is the timeline? What's the runway? Do we need to offer severance packages? What do we do with the office lease? And he started to flood me with a ton of questions, and I didn't have an answer to any of those questions. Think about what a difficult position as a founder or an entrepreneur, where you're all you need to think about is how to grow this business, how to make it a success. And suddenly someone's telling you and say, you know what? Stop thinking about how to live. Let's think about how to die.
Hi, I'm Rory Holland, CEO of Customer and the host of Mighty Finsights. Every year, I talk with hundreds of financial leaders and innovators. We unpack the highs and lows of working in financial services and fintech. Today, Dori Yona, the founder and CEO of SimpleClosure, joins the show. We hit on some amazing topics, including what it's like commanding a fleet of combat ships as a 20-something, the reason why he would rather skydive than bungee jump, and why millions of companies shut down every year, but nobody wants to talk about it. Join me as we get to know the people behind the brands we trust. Let's dive in. Awesome. Well, Dori, such a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Rory.
Yeah, man, it's good to know you. We were just talking off camera about our mutual friend Levi King over at Naval, so it's good to finally get to chat with you in person. And so lots of stuff I want to get into, but you've done so many interesting things. SimpleClosure, what a neat business. We're going to dive into that. But before we do that, you shared a couple of things about your background, some of the things that you've done. And one thing I wanted to ask you is something about, you mentioned bungee jumping in New Zealand. Tell me about that. And does that have anything to do with the way you run your businesses? That kind of attitude and jumping into things?
Maybe. Great question. I'll never go bungee jumping again in my life. So I don't know if that has to do with how I run my businesses, because I probably will start more businesses down the line. But I was, long story short, I finished, actually, I used to serve in the military in the IDF when I was living in Israel. And one of the most common things that people do post-military service is they go traveling the world for a year. And so I went traveling for a year. Part of that journey included about a month and a half in New Zealand. And I had never bungee jumped. I actually skydived in the past, which was really fun and I would love to do again. And I went bungee jumping. I think it was in Queenstown, New Zealand, in the South Island, and I think it's the highest jump over a gorge. It's in a gorge. You jump. It was the craziest thing I ever did. I don't think I'll ever do it again in my life. Is the short of it. And people ask me always why was it that scary? Skydiving wasn't scary. I'll happily do skydiving again. But why was bungee so scary? Because you're actually on the ledge and you are cognitively jumping to your death in a sense, because it's so close and you see the ground. And I literally couldn't get my legs to move when I went to jump, because it's your brain is telling you don't die. You're not supposed to die. And you're supposed to jump. So everyone's waiting on you and jump. And it's your brain's don't move. So literally I had to be shoved a bit over to take that leap. But it was definitely the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And how does it relate to starting businesses or running? I don't think it relates. It's beyond chaos, bungee jumping, at least from my perspective.
Did somebody push you off?
I think I got a little nudge, honestly. All that whole day is a bit shady, and I don't remember it clearly, but I do remember the fact that I literally my legs were the heaviest I couldn't move my legs to and I think I just tipped over. I didn't physically, how people jump off the ledge. I think I just tipped over and went reverse because I remember not having motion in my feet. That's what I remember. Yeah. I don't think someone physically pushed you because I don't know if it's allowed, but I just remember tipping over.
They probably wanted to come on, hurry up, man. Let's go.
Yes. Wow. Was that scary?
You obviously, the ropes didn't snap. You didn't hit the ground. You bounced back. You made it. What a life experience. And you've done a lot of cool stuff. Like you mentioned the IDF, and I want to get into that just a minute. Like, so how did you get, like, you were in the IDF as a young man, you served in the Navy from what I read. And did you end up commanding a ship? What was your role and what was that like?
Yeah, great question. So I drafted when I was 18, which is the typical draft age in Israel. It's mandatory service for those that aren't aware. And I actually got routed to the Naval Academy. And it was about a 4-year training to become eventually like first level of a captain of the ship. It's about a 4-year training. And so I went through that entire training process. I ultimately became the captain of a combat ship. And then eventually I progressed to be an instructor in the Naval Academy for a period of time. And then eventually my last role in the Navy in Israel was I was a commander of a platoon of ships. So I actually commanded multiple ships out on missions and about 50 to 100 soldiers, depending on the mission.
What was that like? Because you were in your 18, you were drafted. And so you must have been in your early 20s and you were commanding a ship?
Yeah, in retrospect, it sounds a bit crazy, but like at the time, you're like, oh, this is normal. Like you're in charge of people's lives, and you know, it's actually funny in the military in Israel, whatever position you're in, they make you sign like an agreement that you're responsible for the equipment that they give you. So like, and literally they show you a dollar amount of what that equipment is worth. And so I remember signing like the deed in a sense. You know, it's the military, so it's not exactly deeds, but like you sign, I got like a list that I'm responsible for like, you know, $40 or $100 million, like in terms of equipment that I'm responsible for. So that was like, I think when it settled, the load of the responsibility. But yeah, it's something that sounds outrageous, but I think it's so unique to be able to go to the military at such a young age, have so much responsibility, work in such a high pressure environment. So in retrospect, it seems crazy to do it in your 20s, but I think at the time, you know, I felt ready for it.
God, that must have been, what an experience. What did that teach you? Like at such a young age, is it something, was there something about that experience that taught you that you maybe wouldn't have learned anywhere else? Yeah,
I think two things actually that I take from my military that probably shaped me the most. First of all, there's a famous saying, and I'll translate it. It's probably common in English as well, but I'll try to translate it to English. But like the common saying where it's like everything's in your mind. Like everything can be everything can be accomplished. You can accomplish anything. It's all a matter of like in your head. And I think that there were things that I went through either through the training or the actual military service of like a week of no sleep or like crazy missions that, you know, included like very, very high physical strength and like and perseverance. And I'm like, I can't do this. I'm like not the most athletic. I'm not an Ironman of any sort or anything like that. And I said to myself, like, there's no way I could do this. And I think that one thing the military showed me is like, there is no such thing that like you can't do it. It's all in your head. And if you like push through, you will get through, whether in a collapsed state or a not collapsed state, like TBD. But I think that's one thing that I take. And I think the other thing is that's very specific to the role I did is ultimately like commanding people on a ship is very unique because you really have to orchestrate the team to all fire on the same cylinders, like in terms of, you know, you're in a very small confined space. You're out at sea with a lot of challenges. And I think that like from a leadership management perspective, it gave me a lot of unique experience that I think, you know, shaped my leadership style or management style. So I think those are the two things that I probably took from there.
Were there any like the guys and gals, I guess, on the ship? I don't want to presume who all's on it, but I imagine there were people older than you. And what was it like commanding people? And like maybe is there a story or two of like you had to confront somebody about following a command that maybe they didn't want to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm gonna try to think back, but yes, to your point. There's people that are either older than you or not necessarily older than you. When you step foot on the ship as the new captain, they might be a year or two younger than you, but they've been on the ship for 2-3 years, and so you're coming like with very little experience. And so sometimes they'll kind of treat you in that way or behave in a way that's, that portrays that. I'm trying to think of like, it's obviously something that people have challenges in the military and Navy specifically, especially with like ranks and things like that. But like, I've always taken an approach where I don't believe in leading because of my ranks. So like, I would also like officers, they have, the ranks here on their shoulders in Israel. And I would say like, I don't feel like I want to or need to lead because of the ranks on my shoulder. And so I would approach every person on the ship or on shore or the staff on shore is like, we're equals. And like, I'm not asking you to do something because I'm an officer or a certain rank. I'm going to ask you to do something because I believe it's the right thing. And like, I'll lead from that perspective.
I'm blown away by the maturity that Dori brought to his commanding role on that ship. Speaking from 25 years of experience leading teams, this is the essence of leadership and unshakable credibility. I think a lot of people start their careers believing that rank or a job title will give them the authority to lead, but that's backwards. If you haven't earned the trust of your team, no promotion is going to win it for you. Of course, it's one thing to say that in the boardroom. It's something else to live it on the bridge with lives at stake.
That's kind of always been my style. There's always been people that have like operated in a certain way because of their ranks, and I never like connected with that side of things.
Yeah, I was going to say just respecting one another, right? Whether you're in a position, particularly when you're in a position of power, I think it's even more important. And being a founder of a company, and I know you founded a few companies, which is what I wanted to transition to now, is tell me a little bit about your background prior to SimpleClosure. Like, were there particular highlights? And I wanted to specifically talk about a particular low light that I think turned into SimpleClosure from what I read. But before we get into that, like, what were you doing before SimpleClosure and like what led you to that point? And then I wanted to read you a little something.
Yeah, sure. So, I finished my military service. I served for about 7 years, and I kind of went out into the world to start companies. I think I just gravitated towards starting tech companies. My parents were founders of a company in Silicon Valley in like the late 80s, early 90s. So I kind of grew up in that type of household. And so I gravitated toward there. The first company I actually started was back in 2015, I want to say. It was actually like a social networking dating app. So that was the first company I started. Didn't take off the way I'd hoped. And so eventually pivoted to start a company called Ernie. Ernie was in consumer fintech. What we did is we built a platform that automated something called price protection. It's a policy that most major retailers and credit cards offer. So imagine you go to Best Buy, you buy a TV for $1,000, it goes on sale the next week. You're actually owed a refund for the difference. And so no one actually tracks that or knows about these rules or has the time to file these claims. And so we built that into a pretty decent sized business. We grew to 3.5 million users. And at a certain point in time, things weren't going so well. And we were looking at the option of shutting down. And that's pretty much what got me down the path of like the shutdown world and the shutdown space and understanding the ins and outs, which again, depending how deep you want to go, fast forward is what got me to start SimpleClosure. So, yeah.
Can I read you something?
Sure.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of research and it was a very positive post on LinkedIn. You guys raised $15 million about a year ago, I think, from what I read. Yeah, what I want to read you is, it really struck me because as a founder of a handful of companies myself, I don't really like the word failure. Like, I think failure is a true statement, but you can look at it different ways. Like you talked about mindset. Like you can look at failure as an opportunity to learn and to grow. So whether you want to call it failure or success, falling success, or whatever you want to call it, there's all kinds of different ways people frame it. But basically you wrote, 5 years ago, my board told me I needed to shut down my company. That moment was one of the lowest points in my life as an entrepreneur. especially as I searched for help and found none. I struggled to navigate the shutdown process. What I learned then drives me today. Shutting down is as natural as starting up, and it should come with the same amount of support. So we're building what I desperately needed back then: infrastructure for clean endings and tools for closure that power new beginnings. That's beautiful. So take me back in time. Like when you hear me say that, like, where does your head go? And like, what was that moment? And that moment, the light bulb went off, like, I need to start this business.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's powerful to hear it again. Like, I haven't revisited that post in a year, right? It's been like a year or so since we posted it. I think actually May of last year ish. So it's powerful to hear it again. Look, the situation was pretty much as you read it. We had been a Series A company. We had raised, I think, total of like $13 million. We had done relatively well. It felt like we were on a roller coaster. We'd grown to 3.5 million users. We were on Good Morning America. We were on the Kelly and Ryan show. Like, we're at the peak of our company. But also, like any startup, faced a ton of challenges. Like, when you get into the numbers, into the revenue, into the growth rates and things like that, we weren't doing as well. And we had this really, really tough board meeting where we came into a board meeting and things aren't growing as good as we hoped, but we're like, okay, but this is fine. This is like the journey, and we'll get a bridge from our investors, this no biggie, right? And so we kind of came to this board meeting and presented the financials, and expected our board to kind of come in here and support. And the board looks at the financials and looks at the runway and says, hey guys, this doesn't look good. We're not going to support the business any further. We're not going to put additional capital, and we don't think that based on these numbers you can raise more money. I think we need to talk about a plan B. And in my mind, I'm like, what plan B? There is no plan B. There's only one plan A. It's like unicorn, right? And so I asked the board, what do you guys want to talk about? Like, what do you expect to see? And they're like, hey, listen, we'd like to see a shutdown analysis for the business. We'd like to understand, what is the timeline? What's the runway? Do we need to offer severance packages? What do we do with the office lease? We're sitting in this beautiful office. What do we do with it? And he started to flood me with a ton of questions, and I didn't have an answer to any of those questions. And think about like what a difficult position as a founder or an entrepreneur, where you're like, all you need to think about is like how to grow this business, how to make it a success, how to make this how to win. And suddenly someone's telling you and say, you know what? Stop thinking about how to live. Let's think about how to die. Right. And that is a very rough awakening and like harsh conversation to have. It's a harsh thought to have. I remember going home from that board meeting. Obviously, I didn't have answers to the board on any of the questions they had. And I remember going home that evening from the board meeting, like depressed, like one of the lowest points in my life, right? Like, you're still running a business. You still have employees. Like, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to like go down and plan your funeral while your employees are working their ass off to try to like launch a sex partnership or this new product feature? And so, yeah, it was a really, really, really tough moment. I had, no idea where to even start and how to get answers to the board. And so I ended up going down this rabbit hole of, first thing to do is I literally went to Google and I'm like, how do you shut down a startup? And I expected to find like a product or a platform, service providers. I didn't find anything. And so then I went to my LinkedIn. I'm like, okay, let's look at other founders in my network that have shut down their companies, and let's ask them, how do they do it? What are the do's and don'ts? And so I started searching my LinkedIn. I couldn't find anyone. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And what I realized really quickly is that it's not that founders don't shut down. They just don't write about it on LinkedIn. So that was another thing. And then I actually reached out to our lawyers. We were using one of the top law firms at the time was Fenwick, and we thought, they'd done our fundraising and everything. And we were like, oh, they'll for sure help. And the answer I got from our law firm was like, oh yeah, shutting down, that's not really our bread and butter. I have a friend of a friend. He has a boutique law firm in Texas. He might be able to help you. So those were kind of the answers and results we got. And yeah, you're kind of like, giving me flashbacks back to that time and period. It was a dark, difficult period.
Yeah, I can feel it. Like, it's interesting how the system works. Like when you think about it, right? Everybody gets excited about an idea. They get behind it. There's tons of support. There's tons of money pours into it. You had traction, and there maybe was a way out. I don't know. I wasn't there, but hearing those kind of words from your board and then being like, okay, we're going to shut it down is like completely contrary to what any founder wants to hear. And to hear what you went through, because you went home, you didn't have anybody to go to. And yeah, not enough people talk about the failures in their life. You only see on social media and LinkedIn all the successes, but we know as humans and as business owners, there's a lot of failures behind all of those positive posts. And not everybody, most of us, I would say, let me change that. None of us live a perfect life. So at that stage in your business, what did you do next? Like, because SimpleClosure went from I need it to like reality. Like, what did you do after that? Like, you had to pick yourself up. You had to wake up the next day. What happened next?
Yeah. So first of all, I very much agree with what you're saying. I think the system rewards success. Like, it doesn't reward failure. And I think that the system is built in a way, and I'm not saying it's wrong or right. It's just the way the system is built. It's built in a way where, like, even like venture investors, if it's not a winning horse, if it's not a company that's going to do well, like, they are told and taught to like deprioritize, walk away. Like, that's not where you should be investing your time. You should be investing your time in the companies, like, the 10%, 5% of the portfolio that's going to succeed. So I think it's like it's an industry-wide issue. But back to your question of like what we did. So I obviously had to get back to the board with answers. I didn't have answers. And so I just decided to roll up my sleeves and dig into the world of shutting down. I started to reach out to industry experts, lawyers that deal with like ABCs, bankruptcies, Chapter 7, Chapter 11, dissolution, really try to like dive deep into this world to understand what I need to do, because there wasn't a resource, and I felt like I needed to get back to the board with answers. And keep in mind, like, I'm doing all this while I'm also trying to run the business, trying to raise additional capital, trying to sell the company, right? Any other outcome except shutting down. And so it's very, it's a very weird state, but, what I was doing, so I was kind of talking to these industry experts, and ultimately I ended up putting a playbook together. It took me a good few weeks. I put a playbook together. I sent it to the board. The board took a look at it, signed off, and they were like, okay, this plan works. Luckily, I was able to, while building the shutdown plan, I was able to actually raise an extension to our previous round from new investors. And so that gave us actually a bit more runway. And we actually ended up launching a product line that ended up being one of like our largest hockey stick growths in the company's history. And it has to do a bit with COVID and like and the timing of COVID and transaction data from consumers. And so we ended up selling the business probably about a year and a half later, give or take, from when that incident happened. And so we were fortunate enough to exit the business and sell it, but we had already done like 2 rounds of layoffs, prepared the company already for like full shutdown, gone through the whole exercise, and were ready to pull that trigger. And so, again, tell me how deep you want me to go, but fast forward to starting SimpleClosure. I mean, I'm happy to chat about that, but we ended up exiting Ernie. I ended up spending a bit of time kind of taking a break, consulting, spending time with family. And I wanted to go back to building. It was kind of something that I didn't want to give up on the passion of building. And so I ended up, this idea for SimpleClosure was bubbling in me ever since that incident that happened like 2-3 years ago. And I just had to explore it further.
The founding premise of SimpleClosure seems so obvious. Of course, entrepreneurs and investors need guidance and support to shut down a company. Silicon Valley talks a lot about failing fast and failing forward without addressing what it means to end a company well. When you put all your energy into making a business succeed, it's hard to give a second thought to shutting it all down. But Dori is the embodiment of the fail forward philosophy. In a minute, you'll even hear him talk about recycling the U.S. economy, salvaging millions of failed businesses for something better. It's a beautiful vision to bring redemption out of so much pain.
And so I went even deeper into the space. I spent time interviewing probably close to 100 founders that have either shut down, in the process of shutting down, thinking of shutting down, in order to understand what they did, what they were going through, really understand the customer pain. And another thing is I spent a lot of time researching the market, which opened up my eyes to realize that there's actually millions of companies shutting down every year in the US. And so I think the combination of hearing the pain point from customers and understanding how big the TAM was is what ultimately made me pull the trigger and start SimpleClosure about 3 years ago.
What is the TAM? I was doing some research before we came on and looking at the percentage, because there's different ways you can shape it. Percentage of small businesses that fail every year, percentage of startups that fail every year, like seed round, A round, B round. You probably know the math, but what does the data look like? 'Cause I know a significant amount of companies don't make it every year.
Yes, great question. So it depends how you think of the TAM. I would say the way we think about SimpleClosure and the vision for SimpleClosure is our vision is to actually recycle the $30 trillion US economy. And what's actually really fascinating and interesting is if you look at the amount of companies that start every year and the ones that shut down, it's pretty equal. The US economy has stayed flat for a few decades now at around 30-something million small businesses. And you have about 4-ish million companies incorporating every year, and you have 4 million or so companies shutting down each year. And so what we see as the opportunity in the TAM is this 4 million, these 4 million companies are shutting down every year. How do we help them recycle that, shut down the company, monetize their assets, which is something that we launched a few months ago and came out of stealth last month. But that's part of how we look at the TAM.
So for those listening, TAM, total addressable market, that's significant. I mean, 4 million potential customers for SimpleClosure. What is it? Describe for me, what is it that you guys actually do?
Yeah.
I imagine I don't know if you have counselors on staff, emotional support people. Maybe you do.
It is one of the most requested features that we don't offer yet, actually, like coaches and psychologists and emotional support. So we get that question all the time. You're not wrong for asking. But the way to think about it is we built a platform to help streamline and automate the actual shutdown process of a company. If you look at venture-backed companies, for example, the average time it takes to shut down is typically 9 to 12 months. If you use traditional firms, it can cost tens of thousands and sometimes north of $100,000 to help shut down the company entirely and be able to walk away. And in almost every case, when you do it the old way, you do things wrong and there's fines and penalties that you get months and years later. And so the way to think about SimpleClosure is we've automated that process and streamlined it so that we can help companies shut down in a matter of days to weeks. We do it for a fraction of the cost. We use a lot of technology to streamline that process. And beyond just the bureaucratical, legal, logistical side of shutting down a company, one of the things that I think we add a lot of value is we help those companies also monetize their assets. So when a company comes to shut down, think about they have assets, and in 95% of the cases, companies usually don't monetize their assets because they don't know how, or they've tried maybe reaching out to a competitor and there's not a lot of value to that competitor, but there's a lot of value in those assets in other ways, shapes, and forms. So that's kind of how we assist companies with this process.
When you started to shape SimpleClosure, I think you had mentioned that you had interviewed lots of leaders of companies that were in that difficult season and either shut down their businesses or were going to. Were you traveling at that point? Was that your in between, right? Were you on the road? I think I read in Mexico.
Yeah.
Pressure.
So when I was, yes, exactly. So when I was looking to go back to building, I needed my wife's permission. Because obviously it takes a toll on the family life to start a company and being an entrepreneur. So I told my wife, hey, I really want to go back to building, but before I make a decision that will shape the next potentially decade of our lives, I want to think long and hard about it and make sure it's something that I believe in, I'm passionate about, that it's the right decision. So actually did the first company offsite. That was the first official company. I flew by myself to Mexico, left her and the kids so that I could go and kind of think with myself. And I spent a good few days just, understanding the TAM and the market and spending time also researching other ideas in parallel. But it was part of the story that led me to where I am today.
Yeah, and that just want to go back one thing in SimpleClosure. Prior to SimpleClosure, when you were shutting down your other business, probably not a lot of things people talk about is like, what about your people? Like, how did you handle that as a leader? I know we want to handle it elegantly with kid gloves, but like, what was going on in your head at that time and with your team to try to guide them through this sale process at this point? But you had already started to wind it down and you had layoffs. Like the remaining people, what was that like?
Yeah, look, I think people is probably one of the, I would say the thing that founders probably find the most difficult to deal with is probably investors and team. Those are the two things, because I think to some extent, those are the people that we probably feel we're disappointing the most, because they've either invested in us their time or their money, right? And I think that that's the thing that people value most is time and money. So I think talent in people is probably even higher than investors from what I see, at least what I felt at the time. But I think that it's there's no easy answer, right? It's like one of those really difficult decisions. When you sit to do layoffs, there's so many factors that go into that. Like, who do I keep? Who do I let go? Do I think that the people that I keep here, they will be worried from the financial situation of the company that they will actually get up and go look for another job, right? And so you start to factor in, like, by keeping these people, do I think that they'll have higher loyalty to stay, even though they're not more critical? But these critical people actually have low loyalty. So the moment we do layoffs, even if we keep them, they're probably going to be looking for a job. So you start to get into like these crazy amount of calculations of like, who do you keep? Who do you have to part ways with? And then it starts to, like, once you make that list, it's how do I share it? Do I share it with everyone at the same time? Do I take person by person in and give them the news? How do I update the rest of the team that's staying about the decision? How do I give confidence? Most importantly, how do you give confidence for the team that's staying that they should even stay, that it's worth their time, that you're not going to lay them off in 3 to 6 months because you miscalculated? So there's a lot of like really, really extensive considerations to make here when going through that process of a layoff, and a lot of emotion involved, a lot of risks for being sued, for like there's so many things going on. It's honestly, I think layoffs is maybe, if not the most difficult thing to go through as a founder, probably laying off people, I would have to say. Yeah,
I appreciate you sharing that. It's like we were talking about earlier. Not a lot of people are going to post about shutting down their business, nor are they going to post about the challenges of layoffs or how to even communicate a circumstance like you're in at that point. I want to go back to the origin story, back to your Mexico trip. So your wife gave you permission. You're like, I'm going to start something else. You went on a solo retreat. You were in Mexico. You started talking to people. I think I read that you had started you built an MVP like on Airtable. And shortly after, you had a paying customer?
Yeah, so went to Mexico, I came back from Mexico with the decision, I'm building SimpleClosure. Like, that was the decision of Mexico. And so what I started doing from then on was I was in the process of doing like founder interviews. I continued doing those founder interviews. And I'm getting all these interviews. I still have no product. I have nothing. I just want to learn. What did you go through? How did you shut down? What were the do's and don'ts? Like, that's what I was going through. And then I think by like call, I don't know what, 10, 15, 20, something around that range in the teens, I end up a call with this founder that's going through a shutdown. They're already working on their next company. And he's like, hey, listen, dude, I love what you're doing. You have so much more knowledge than like 90% of the lawyers I talk to about helping us shut down this company. Can I just pay you to like consult us to shut down the company? And in my mind, I'm thinking like, Yes, but like we have nothing, right? Like I have nothing. And so I literally, I told this founder, hey, listen, our beta is almost ready. Well, it'll be ready in like a week or so, but I'm happy to bring you on as a beta customer. And he's like, sure, no problem. Sounds good. And so I hung up the phone. I went and searched quickly what platforms can I build on, right? This was like pre-Claude and all these things where you can build a website like in 10 minutes. But anyways, I actually built the first version in Airtable, and I pulled out from the drawer the shutdown plan we had put for Ernie like 3 years later, like earlier. I took that information. I spent a lot of time. I built a first version of an Airtable, and I emailed him a week later. I said, hey, I have a service agreement ready for you to be, a customer if you want to be part of the pilot.
The market was there waiting for Dori to crystallize his idea into a business plan. Not his first idea, but perhaps his best one. The seeds of SimpleClosure were planted in the ashes of Ernie. There's something almost holy about what Dori and his team are doing. In a moment of immense grief, pain, and stress, they're offering practical support and compassion. As a clinical psychologist and leadership coach, Dr. Henry Cloud wrote in his book, Necessary Endings, without the ability to end things, people stay stuck, never becoming who they are meant to be, never accomplishing all that their talents and abilities should afford them. That's what SimpleClosure is making possible.
He said, send it to me. He signed. I remember it was like 10:30 p.m. He signed. I think I didn't fall asleep until like 3 a.m. Because I was so excited because we signed our first customer, and he ended up being our first customer. We're actually friends to date. We became friends from that experience, and we're friends to date, and I help him with his other company, and he's doing really well. And we stayed in really close touch, and we built a relationship from there. But that was like the story of our first customer.
Oh, that's so cool. So you built it on Airtable. You called it a beta. I love it. And you won the customer, and you're still friends. That's
yes.
And you did good work. That's awesome. I'd like to shift gears a little bit. Said we like to ask a question of our guests, a fantasy executive headhunting question, and you picked the founder of Costco.
Yes.
Neat.
Why is that unique?
Tell me why.
It's one of the best businesses ever created.
It's a great, trust me. Yeah. Raising kids and animals. We got a house full. So yeah, Costco is always a blessing to be able to go and stock up on stuff. But yeah, what's about James that you like so much?
So first of all, there's a really good podcast. I think it was Acquire that did a podcast about Costco and James Senegal and the whole story of Kirkland and Costco and all of that. It's a long one, but it is interesting. Look, I think what's so unique about Costco is obviously, like, as a consumer, as a shopper, like, I love it. It just, like, if there's anything I need less is decision making in my life. I make enough decisions all day, and I think Costco makes it really easy where you walk into a store and you don't need to make a decision. But I think that, like, what I really value about that business is what a good product they've built. Mm-hmm. Like, it is a good product. Now, I'm not like, yes, when you think about products, you usually think about products in the realm of software products, right? But it is a good product. That's using my language. Like, they have such a strong fan following. They've mastered their ICP. Their customers love their products. Their renewal rates are like one of the lowest churn rates of any product in the market. They've like done that and like built a really successful, thriving business, like with great unit economics. I think there's like all these calculations of like revenue per square foot of a Costco, and like just like the numbers there are mind-boggling. But I think more than anything, they've built a product that consumers love and value and appreciate, and I think that's very unique to do. And yeah, that's kind of my reasoning.
No, I love it. And a highly commoditized market, right? You've got low margins, but yet pay people really well. You've got customer loyalty. What an interesting combination. I can say personally, like over the years going to Costco, it's something, I confess this on air. I actually enjoy going with my wife because I like the way they organize it. So like you said, you don't have to really think. You're just kind of grabbing stuff off the shelf. You're like, oh, we could use a ton of this stuff, right? All the go-tos, but people generally like to work there. From what I can tell, people are pretty friendly and, happy to help out. Okay, another thing I want to ask you too is thinking about the younger folks today. And thinking about the folks listening, you mentioned curiosity as like such a good, strong, soft skill. If I can say it that way, strong, soft, a powerful soft skill to have. What is it about that made it come to mind, and how do you use curiosity in your day to day?
Yeah. When I saw that question, I think a lot about like my kids and like what quality or characteristic I would appreciate or value my kids to have. And I think curiosity, it's just such a important and broad characteristic that like has so much in it. Like it makes you challenge the status quo. It makes you want to learn more. It makes you want to expand your horizons. I just think it's such a fundamental, important skill. And I think like where like ask my team, I will ask why 100 times until I get to the answer. Like why, to eventually get to the actual answer. And I think that you learn so much from that. And, you know, I ask because I'm curious, and by asking questions, you unlock 5 other things that you didn't think of or didn't know of, or, anyway, so yeah, that's the short of it.
Yeah, I agree. Like curiosity that makes life interesting. Like because you're curious about people, curious about things, curious about nature, like all that stuff. Because if you think about when we come out of the womb and we're kids, particularly running around, like you probably have little ones, or they were little at one time, where our eyes were wide open about everything. You know, going to the beach, going to the mountains, getting in the car, stopping at McDonald's, like whatever. Everything was exciting and curious. They were curious about everything. And I think over time, those of us that can tap into that, there's so many interesting things you can do from a business perspective because you're curious and you're asking questions like, why does it have to be this way? It doesn't have to be. We could solve a problem for it. And that leads me to a couple other things before we close out here. I saw you recently launched SimpleClosure Asset Hub. I'm curious how curiosity led you into that and thinking about more ways that you could serve your customers. And what is Asset Hub?
Yes. So great question. So first of all, Asset Hub is a platform we built within SimpleClosure. So anyone that's a SimpleClosure customer can have access to Asset Hub, and we help them sell and monetize their IP and their assets of the business. And so we started in the venture space with 2 products in Asset Hub. The first is source code. So if you build a software app, in most cases, when software companies go to shut down and you ask them, what'd you do with their code base or their source code? The answer is in 95% of the cases, nothing. Maybe the founder bought it. Maybe we open sourced it. Not much. And the second product we launched in beta is workspace data, which is actually the Slack history, the Google Docs, the PowerPoint presentations you created. And again, that's an example of something that in probably 99.9% of the cases when you shut down, you do nothing with those and you just wipe that data. But it actually turns out that there's a lot of value in that data. And so we started specifically with source code and workspace for venture-backed companies. We, on our roadmap, plan to expand into other places like domains and talent and patents and trademarks and physical assets. So there's a lot where we want to expand into. So that's short about Asset Hub. And how do we get there? Look, it's a combination of 2 things. One, our vision from day one, when we started SimpleClosure, I kind of said from the get-go, we're going to help companies shut down, but there's this whole other realm of like beyond helping the 4 million companies shut down. Our hypothesis was if you look at these 4 million companies, they're actually sitting on trillions of dollars worth of assets in different shapes and forms. And if we can help those companies shut down, we actually have access to this asset class that is like unrecognized, unmonetized, because it sits in a very fragmented ecosystem. If you look at the world of like IP and assets, it is a very fragmented market that is not consolidated. And our thesis is if we own the supply of companies that shut down, we can build that platform in an effortless way and create a lot of value. So it's something that's always been part of our vision. But I think what got us there even quicker was curiosity. And we talked to founders and got on call and we're like, okay, you're shutting down. We'll help you. What else can we do? What can we do better? What do you wish we had? And so that started getting us down that path. And as we spent more time, we started to even be more curious. So what'd you do with your code base? What'd you do with your data? What'd you do with your domains? What'd you do with those things? And so that led us down the curiosity ultimately, I think, led us down that path of launching Asset Hub.
Yeah, I love it. Before we close out, a couple more things. One, I just wanted to reread what I read to you, the end of it, because what you've made me think about is, failures in life can be a stepping stone to something even more brilliant that you might not even foresee, because you can be in the darkness at the moment. It's darkest for its light, right? So it might be the worst time in your life, and then all of a sudden, kind of like you going on your Mexico trip, got it, right? Like, I know what I want to do. And so you took a circumstance that was really terrible and you turned it into something really meaningful. Look at the business you've built. And we probably don't pause enough. You seem like the type of guy as a founder of multiple companies. I hope you'll take time and pause and reflect on the beautiful thing that you've built, because you're helping founders and leaders of companies out of really difficult circumstances. And the new addition of Asset Hub and the ability to value things that they've built in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to value, instead of just shutting them down or putting on a server somewhere. That's really meaningful. So what I wanted to read was the last sentence that you wrote from your post last year. And it basically said, infrastructure for clean endings, tools for closure that power new beginnings. Like, that is a beautiful thing sitting at the heart of what SimpleClosure is, that I imagine the years ago when you started it, you probably didn't connect those dots, but you wrote it a year ago. That really resonates with me. So I'm really grateful for what you built and what you're doing.
Of course.
I want to thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think that, like, we talk about this a ton in the company. We don't get excited by shutting down companies. Like, we don't wake up in the morning and the team's like, oh, we're going to shut down, 10 companies today. Like, that doesn't excite us. I think what excites us is moving. We see ourselves as enabling the movement of the economy, being able to get these founders and entrepreneurs back on their feet as fast as possible so that they can go back to building their next business. And the more that they're, wasting their time on shutting down a company and doing the bureaucratical, logistical side of things, that's where they're not out there building and investing their time in, like, making change. And so I think that's ultimately, like, what drives us as a company.
I love it. All right. I feel like that's a good place to end. I wanted to ask, what's the best way to get in touch with you for fintech and financial leaders, other folks that might be listening to the podcast? Where's the best place for them to find you and get in touch?
Sure. I'm available via email, Dori@SimpleClosure.com. They can also add me on LinkedIn or on X, Dori Yona. But I'm pretty available across those platforms.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. It was great. Great to get to know you.
Thanks for having me.
There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired using gold to highlight the cracks. It's a way of acknowledging how failure and trauma can become a treasured part of our history. They don't make us less valuable, they make us irreplaceable. Dori Yona could have done what most founders do after failure: move on, rebrand, and gloss over the pain. Instead, he went back in. He interviewed 100 founders who'd walked through the same darkness. And because he couldn't find a map for his own journey, he created one to share with other founders. And that's what became SimpleClosure. I can't say enough good things about the redemptive power of what Dori and his team are doing. They don't get excited about shutting down companies. They get excited by what comes next. By getting founders back on their feet, by exchanging beauty for ashes and despair for hope. Nobody wants to imagine that their business will be the one to fail, but the odds aren't good. By year 5, half of all businesses in the US will close permanently. In a world that only celebrates launches and high-flying exits, Dori Yona is quietly building the infrastructure for the millions of teams who need to sweep up the pieces of a shattered dream and find a way to build something better. That's the gold. Thank you for listening to Mighty Finsights. You'll find all of our episodes on our website, CSTMR.com, including more one-on-one interviews with fintech and financial leaders, as well as deep dive episodes on specific topics like branding and marketing. This show is produced and distributed by Customer, a financial marketing agency. All rights reserved. Our production team includes Zach Garver, Kathy Logan, Axel Reyes, Brad Jurger, Romina Gomez, and Belin and Curio.